Thursday, December the 15th, 2010. My name is Connie Mason. This is an oral history interview with Roy Hilton Willis. And thank you, Roy, for coming in today. I really appreciate it. It's a real good duck day, isn't it?
Yeah, it's cold enough.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, basically where you were born and your mom and daddy's names and where they were from.
Well, I was born in Stacy, North Carolina, 18th of December, 1932.
Oh my gosh, it's almost your birthday. Happy birthday.
My father's name was Eldon Willis, and my mother's name was Lina Helen Mason Willis.
And we're kin.
Yeah. All Mason and all Willises in this area. If you'd go back far enough, you
That's right.
trace
it back.
Trace it back to where you can.
Now, Roy, you grew up in Stacy, and what did your daddy do for a living?
Well, when I was growing up, he was a fisherman. We done all kinds of fishing, clamming, mulleting in the summer, peeler crabbing, soft crabbing in the spring. In the fall of the year, they were fishing. Sometimes in the winter, they'd be oystering. Just all types of general work as a fisherman.
He got involved with hunting too, right?
Yeah, he was a hunter. I mean, they did this was their sport, a pastime. He was also a decoy maker. He made decoys to hunt with. They sold them to other people. He was born in 1908, May the 20th. And about 1922, when he was 14-year-old, he started making decoys. And he made the decoys on his own. And in 1926, he partnered up with Mr. Elmer Salter, and they made decoys until 1964. Mr. Elmer passed away, and then he recruited me to help him, and I started working with him.
How old were you then?
32 in 1964. We worked together for 17 years until he passed away, and I continued on making decoys. When I started working with him, we were selling decoys for $1.25 a piece. And now the wood to make one will cost you $15 to $20.
Times have changed.
Just a little bit.
When, you said he made decoys and people. I mean, you didn't advertise or anything, did you?
It was just a word of mouth. Most everybody down east, Beaufort, you might say, a lot of people knew each other, knew what was going on in each community. They just, by word of mouth, that's how they knew what I could do.
Mostly local folks that would come by?
It was mostly local. A few sports that come in the area to hunt in the various hunting clubs, they would stop by. I started going with my father about 7 years old. My first boat, a skiff, when I was 10-year-old, clam in and crab in. And when I was 10, 12-year-old, during the summer, of course I went to school in the winter. In the summer, I made as much money as Daddy did.
That's great.
After I got out of school, I graduated in 1950. And in 1951, me and my father went on the Outer Bank peeler crabbing. And peeler crabbing always, unless you had a real cold winter, it always started the first week in April. In 1951, 4 weeks in April and the first week in May, we sold 20,000 fiddle crab and soft crab.
Oh my goodness.
And we got 5 cents a piece for them. And now they're about $3-4 a dozen of salt crabs. I mean, $3 or $4 a piece. Mm. And after that, in the Korean War, in the Army, I was in the Army, so I joined the Coast Guard. I just been around boats, and that's what the Coast Guard was all about, being around boats. And I stayed in that for a year. The rates were hard to make, and I decided to get out, and I got out and was out 90 days, 89 days. I started with Carteret and I worked up there for 34 years.
What was your job there at Cherokee?
I started out as an apprentice, and I went to the apprentice school. We went to school, and we went to various shops. I started out as an electrician. I found out from Coast Guard experience that the electricians and the electronic people had a better job than what I did as a boatswain mate, running the boats. So I started out as an electrician, and after a couple of years, I switched over to electronics because that was a higher paying. And that's what I worked at the rest of the time I was up there. And well, just before I retired, a couple of years before I retired, I went to what we call production job. And I made supervisor at that. I retired as a 8-step GS 11.
Wonderful.
From civil service.
Wow. And that was just, what, 4 years ago? That you retired?
I've been retired 23 years.
23 years! Oh my goodness, that's, wow. Wow, that's great.
And I went back in the reserve. I didn't go back when I first started in the reserve. I went back in the Air Force Reserve. Julian Ray Murphy and Nelson Gillikin, they were the commanding officer and the executive officer of the Air Force Reserve. And we went to meetings in Moorhead. And I stayed in that for 4 years and a month. And they transferred it to Kinston. Kinston on weekends. And I found out about the Coast Guard. They had a reserve unit in Moorhead, so I switched right over to the Coast Guard. And I stayed in that for 31 years, 3 months.
Quite a service record then.
Well, I had reserve and regular time. I had 38 years and 4 months and 27 days.
Wow, that's incredible.
I retired out of that. So I'm what they call a triple dipper.
When did you start making you had your service time, and when did you ever quit after that? I mean,
no, I made Decoys right on since I started with him in 1964. Mm-hmm. I just worked with him for 17 years before he passed away, and then I've continued on.
Mm-hmm. Do you use his templates? I mean, did he have templates or anything? Or
we had patterns drawn out on shoe boxes and lids and stuff, cut out just paper, and I use them. I make them just like we did, mm-hmm. Very similar. He was probably a little bit better in his shaping than I am, but the Decoy, but they're pretty similar. I did most of the painting when we were making. My job mainly was to sand and paint. His job was to chop and shape.
Mm-hmm. Now, you started the miniature decoys, didn't you? Because you and your dad never did miniatures, right?
No, we made miniatures.
You did too. You did.
And him and Mr. Elmer made miniatures.
Yeah. So they were even selling for decoration even then?
Yeah.
Back in the
50s and 60s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they made miniatures.
How about that?
They made I reckon what you'd call about a third of the regular size. I make smaller ones than they did. They didn't make the small ones like I'm making.
Mm-hmm.
But me and my father did. We made small ones.
How about that? Well, I didn't realize that the decorative market had come into play by the 50s. That's interesting.
Yeah, they were, well, people just use them for sit on what's not stand on top of a television or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, they're beautiful. I've got several.
I've got one that my father and Mr. Elmer made, one miniature. I've got quite a few that me and my father made that I've kept, and they didn't paint it. I got a fellow I worked with at the Cherry Point, Paul Smith. He painted it. He was like the dabble in artwork,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw he was a pretty good painter, so I got one from him and carried it up there, and he painted it for me.
That's great. You know, in the past, you've done some wonderful demonstrations, public demonstrations about chopping out decoys. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I worked here for the museum whenever they got a tour group coming in, or a group of school children. I'm usually the one they call. There's a few others decoy cars at the time, but they call me quite a lot.
Because
I was here a couple of weeks ago. I run there. A couple of weeks ago, they had 80 hamlock, and they broke them up into 4 groups. So I talked to each group, and I just mainly when I carve for a group like that, I'll just bring a small one in. Because I make the miniature just like I make the full size.
But when you chop them out now, you're just using an axe?
Use a hatchet.
A hatchet?
Well, it's actually a camp axe that I'm using. Just a small. Mainly he used hatchets, which is a little bit different. But you can do the same thing with it.
You chop out the rough form with a hatchet?
Yep. Well, most of the decoys they made, he would just take a log, cut it off 12, 14 inches, or whatever size decoy he was making, and chop it to the shape of the decoy. Mm-hmm. Now I take a pattern, and me and him did the same thing a lot. We take a pattern and saw out of the shape of a decoy. Mm-hmm. Mainly what we do now is just around the edges of it and get it a little more shape. Mm-hmm. Whereas he would take a log and just chop it into the shape of a decoy, give it to Mr. Elmer, and Mr. Elmer would put in a wood vise with a draw knife and sand it off. Well, he would slick it off with that. He wouldn't sand it. They never did sand the bodies on their decoys. That's one way of telling how they made them.
Really?
And who made them. Mm-hmm. They never used no sandpaper on the decoy body. Now, when me and Daddy started making, I used sandpaper. We would take a sheet of sandpaper and nail it on a little square piece of wood and just put it in the wood vise, the decoy, and stand there and shape it, sand it off with because I couldn't do like Mr. Elmer did with the draw knife.
Mm-hmm. That was a lot of skill too with the draw knife, wasn't it?
To slick them out like he did. I mean, you had to look good sometimes to see the marks in them were. Wow. They're not all just shaped round, but you can hold it up in the light and you can see that draw knife mark, and then you can see where he did the next one alongside it.
Mm. Mm. That's great. You talked about the hunting camps too. Now, about how many in that area of Stacy were there of hunting lodges and camps and things?
Well, in the Stacy area, there wasn't but one. That was the Core Banks Club. Mm-hmm. But on farther down towards Portsmouth, through the years, there were 5 or 6 different ones.
Did you go to any?
Some were local people that had them. I went one time with Mr. Julian Hamilton and his son Julian and Mr. Leckler Lewis and another fellow, Henry Kirk. We went to what they call the Evergreens. That's about a mile from Portsmouth. Mm-hmm. And we stayed a week. It was the prettiest time it's ever been all that week. Slick, calm. We done more oystering and cooking than we did hunting.
That sounded like a good time to me.
We were going to come back on Sunday, and there were a northwester blew up, and it was no, on the Sunday it died out. Saturday it died out, and it got foggy, so we stayed extra day Sunday, and we decided to come back up the sound on Monday. And Sunday night is when the northwester blew in, and I saw more geese on the way back. They were flying towards the beach, and we were on our way home. And I think we killed I don't know, several ducks, and might have killed a goose or two, but we didn't have a very good trip as far as hunting. But to me, it was a memorable trip because of the people I was with.
Yeah.
Mr. Julian Hamilton and Mr. Leckler Lewis were two well-known people.
They called him Leck Lewis, didn't they?
Yeah.
That was,
His name was Leckler.
Leckler.
But everybody called him Leck. And my father had hunted with him through the years also.
So that was the Evergreens. I've got some maps, and when we're finished, I'd like to get if you could pinpoint the location on the map for me, I'd appreciate that. And is there anything left of that, of the Evergreens?
Yeah, I think the last I knew of it, I think Claude Wheatley Jr. And had a right into it or something. I think it's still there.
Okay.
But we also, me and my father and Mr. Elmer and Joe Pepper, another fellow from Stacy, and Mr. Elmer's son, one of his sons, Major Salter. We had a camp. We built a camp on the banks.
Where about was that?
It was what you might call right across from sea level. Mm-hmm. The end of the road there, they call it down where the fish houses are at. It was right, almost straight across from that.
Okay.
We didn't own the land. We just went over there and built it.
Yeah.
And when the Park Service obtained all the land, they burned our camp.
Oh.
So that was the end of that.
Well, hindsight, they might have said, that's something we should preserve because that was the usage of the banks, the previous usage. But well, tell me what was it? Was probably pretty rustic, the camp, or did you?
It was best I recall, it was about 18 foot long and about 12 foot wide. Had one front door entrance, and in the back, about 6 or 7 foot, we put a partition across and had 2 doors. We built bunk beds, mm-hmm. three high, mm-hmm. on each side. And my bunk there were 6 of us, so my bunk was at the top bunk. And
because you were the young guy, climbed to the top.
And you could take a gas light and light a Coleman gas lantern in there, mm-hmm. and that would keep that camp almost warm enough.
How about that?
You'd get up early in the morning and light the lights, and we had an old kerosene stove we cooked on, and you had to come out of that top bunk for the heat.
How about that? feel good like on a day like today, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, the walls weren't very high. Probably the walls weren't over 7 foot high.
Was it a flat roof building?
No, it had an A-frame on it.
Oh, okay. And how was it oriented? Were you at the...
We built it right alongside of a creek. Had a little wharf right down to the creek. You just tie your boat right up alongside the dock. Step out of your boat on the wharf and walk 10 or 12 feet. You're in the camp.
So it was on the north side of the creek, or south
Yeah,
side?
it was on the north side of that creek,
Okay.
facing south. And then we built a little shed on the side of it where you could hang your boots or
Put your decoys in there?
No, we didn't put no decoys in there. We always kept them in a boat and bring them back and forth. But you could hang your oil skin jacket in there, raincoat, your boots.
What kinds of meals did you have over there?
Best in the world. Anything that you would eat on the Outer Banks, I guess it's from all the exercise you were getting. It always tasted better than it did anywhere else. We cooked, I remember one time we were over crabbing, and we cooked about 45 soft crabs for breakfast one morning.
Oh my gosh.
I remember another time we were over there, me and Mr. Elmer were over there by ourselves. Mr. Elmer he didn't do a whole lot of hunting. He wanted to look around the shore and find decoys or wood to make decoys. And I was out in our blind one evening. Almost half a mile. I hunted all evening out in that blind by myself. And the sun went down. Of course, about half wet, good running around your car and everything. And I walked across that barge to the camp. And when I got to the camp, Mr. Elmer got a lot of oysters on the stove, a lot of coffee. And the oysters were what we call green eel. And there was some green eel. But the soup was green. But I never had a better meal. And what that was like cold, wet, hard, and that was one of the best meals I've ever eaten.
And it stays with you today. How long ago was that?
That was probably 50 years ago, 60 years ago, between 50 and 60, I'd say.
And well, you fix oyster stew a little bit different than most people.
No, it's just the oysters, probably some cornbread patties around the side, thicken the soup a little bit, and that's the way that would be.
And so, did you call it the Willis camp?
No, we didn't have no name for it.
So we're going
just going to the camp. That was it.
The camp. And did you ever go to any of the other lodges over there?
No, not really. There were some more people that had them. I would walk by them from time to time. Yeah, there were a lot of camps that were used for fishing and hunting. Mr. Clarence Lewis had one right up past ours on the same creek that was up close to the beach. The Piner Brothers, they had one to the south. We were north of the Core Banks Club, and they had one south of the club. And then, of course, they were Sterling Dixon had a hunting camp and a fishing camp across from Davis, and Mr. Ammy Willis, he had camps over there that people would come down and they'd take them out hunting or fishing, whatever they were doing. There were a lot of camps at one time sprung up and down the beach.
Mm-hmm. And did the women ever go over there to the camps, or was that solely man's territory at that time?
Well, they were. We took some friends over there, but that was mostly during the summer. Mm-hmm. We just go over there and spend a night or something.
Mm-hmm. And facilities like bathrooms, did you have outhouses, or did you just go behind a dune? Or
No, there wasn't no facilities.
Yeah.
Open air.
Running water. I mean, you did have running water, so did you have to bring your water to drink, or did you use rainwater? Or?
I think we had a barrel, best I recall now. We had a barrel we caught water, but we'd always carry it. That wasn't very good to drink or anything. Mm-hmm. According to how long it rained, we always carried water. And we'd always have drinks, Pepsis and Coke.
Mm-hmm. What did you have out? What did you take to the blind when you were going to stay a day?
Carry a lard bucket. A lard, we call it a lard can. You used to buy lard in 5-pound cans, and that was our lunchbox. We'd put a sandwich or a cake or whatever, can of beans.
Mm-hmm. What kind of beans were they?
Well, mostly we eat Campbell.
Yeah.
That's what we used to eat during the summer when we were clamming. We carry a Pepsi, one of them 12-ounce Pepsis with us, bottle, and we'd put that in the water. We didn't have any ice. We'd put that in the water
and cool it.
To keep it halfway cool. And when we get dinner time, we'd work back up to where we put it at, and we'd sit on the side of the skiff and open a can of beans and have a big biscuit, and that was our dinner.
Sounds good.
It was good.
I'm amazed by the 42 soft crabs for breakfast, though. That's a dream for a lot of people. That's kind of like,
that's something you'll never see again, or probably never hear about it again.
But I imagine that was good.
And when we were mulls in days during the summer, we'd be molting. We'd come back aboard the beach boat. Most of the time, we'd go from the mainland to the Outer Banks. We'd go in a bigger boat. My father and grandfather, they had a 32-foot wooden boat. We'd go over there, and of course we'd tow the small boats behind us, the skiffs we call it. And we'd go out of multing or clamming. Sometimes if we were multing, we'd come back to the boat and we'd fry some mullet. And they were mighty good meals.
That's not bad.
And before that, we'd fry some cornbread fritter out, and the mullets and cornbread was pretty good to eat.
Did your big boat have a name? Or?
Yeah, they named it the Hilton after me, my middle name.
Oh, that's great. And who built her? Do you know?
I'm not 100, but I think she was Mr. Amber's builder to Atlantic. Mm-hmm. But I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm almost positive he's the one who built it.
Right. It had a cabin on it?
Yeah. And it had at first it had the little, what we call a doghouse. Mm-hmm. It's a little, I don't know, probably 3x3 little box that you put up at the front of the cabin, and you stood up and looked through that to steer the boat. Mm-hmm. But later on, we put what we call a pilot house on it. Where you sit back of the cabin, and of course it had seats in that and everything.
And you could see over the top of the cabin.
Yeah, you could see over the cabin out of that. That's how. they call those pilot houses. And at first she had what the old Lathrop engine in her, where you had the big wheel on the front and you had to crank out a morning to get it started. And when after the World War II, they put what they call a private marine.
So the building had a Lathrop to start with.
Yeah. And that had a clutch on it. With those old Lathrop engines, you didn't have no reverse. When you come into the dock, you had to slow it down so far away from the dock and sort of drift into the dock. And you always had somebody up on the bow that would catch it when it came into the dock. They'd run it in toward a piling, and you grab a hold of that piling and try to hold it off the best you could. Whereas when they got those marine engines, they had a reverse on them, and you could run into the dock at good speed and throw it in reverse and stop it right there. A lot better engines.
Oh yeah. And people just don't realize what skill there is in piloting a boat, do they?
No, there are a lot. You got to know what you're doing according to where you're at, how strong the tides are running, how hard the wind is blowing. Mm-hmm. It all takes effect on docking a boat or whatever.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the... Did you ever get caught out on the banks during a storm? Bad storm?
We did. We were down across from sea level one night. We were over there melting. And me and my father and grandfather. And there was a bad storm came up. And we put out 2 anchors. And it blew so hard that night that one of the anchors that had the hook on it, we call it. It just been around the end of the anchor, and it straightened back with the force of the boat pulling on it.
Incredible.
That was a bad night.
But you survived it.
Oh yeah.
Did you lose any net during that?
No, we didn't lose anything. We kept watch all night, stayed up. We had to stay up. There was no sleeping that night. We stayed up in that boat all night, the 3 of us. And we would bail and plump out the boat, whatever it needed from time to time.
What was your grandfather's name?
Alonzo. Willis. He didn't have any middle name, and my father didn't have a middle name. Everybody called my grandfather Lunny. I guess he spelled it L-U-N-N-I-E, but that wasn't his name. His name was Alonzo. In his later life, after I joined the service, he got him a job at Lloyd A. And he worked there until he retired. Mm-hmm. But then on the weekends, me and him would work in the water. We'd go floundering at nights or go scalloping or clamming on the weekends.
But tell me how you went floundering. I mean, tell me the process of going floundering.
Well, the way we floundered, we had a Coleman lantern. And we built what we call a little bowsprit on the front of a 16-foot pole skip. And we put a little piece of wood over it to shade it from your eyes and just hung it down on the water. And we stood up on the bow of those boats, the skiffs, with a long handle gig, and would just pole around the shore, or not necessarily around the shore. Sometimes we'd go out wherever we were at. If the there were some shoals would make out of them all from the mainland. We'd be out there, especially on the Outer Banks. Now, coasting mostly on the mainland, those shoals it weren't like that on the mainland. It was just, you'd be probably 15 or 20 feet from the bank. Mm-hmm. That's what you'd go out from the bank when you just shovel all night long.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any names for the different sizes of flounders you catch?
No. Back there then you catch any size you wanted to. Mm-hmm. There wasn't no size limit or nothing like that.
I know Daddy referred to a big flounder. I mean, as a doormat.
Well, I've heard that. I've heard that expression too. The biggest flounder I ever caught weighed 9.5 pounds.
Wow. How did you fix him?
Well, we either fried or stewed them. Mm-hmm. They did them, and you could bake them. Some people would put them in a baking pan and put some Irish potatoes and onions on them, mm-hmm. and cook them in the oven.
Mm-hmm. Now, can't do it today, but did you ever do any turtling? Did you ever eat turtles?
I tried turtle 2 or 3 times, but I didn't like it. And there were some people would swear on it, but I never did like it. It was too gooey for me. I didn't like it.
I've never heard it called gooey before.
My grandfather, especially my grandfather, he would like to catch these diamond-backed terrapins. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, you could sell those. And he had you sold those by the length of the bottom shell. A 5-inch one on the bottom would bring 50 cents. The 5.5-inch would bring 75, and the 6-inch one would bring $1.
How about that?
And you could set nets across a creek or something like that, and go up the creek and beat on the boat, the side of the boat and everything, and sometimes you catch fish and sometimes you catch those terrapin.
How about that?
And he got Mr. Mitchell Fulcher, another well-known decoy carver. He got him to make him a measuring stick to measure those tarpon, and I still have it.
I was just going to ask you if it was still around.
I still got it.
How about that? Now that's great.
It's very well carved and everything.
How about that? I'd also heard that they used to burn the marshes to run the turtles out of it. Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, I never heard that.
I think that might have been more Hatter's way.
We would go up on the in some little ponds and things like that in the marsh and take a stick and go along the side of it and stick it in there under the bank, mm-hmm. and that's where those terrapins would get, and you catch them like that. It would sound a right hollow sound when you hit one with the stick that you were.
How about that? I hadn't heard that. That's good. That's real good. Now, I had heard that your father was in commercial fishing for a while. That did he do any long hauling at all, or was he just?
He was. We ran a buy boat.
You ran the buy boat.
It wasn't the buy boat. It was the boat that took it from the carried it to the fishing house. I guess you could call it a buy boat. We weren't actually buying it. We were just transporting long haulers to the fish house. And where we got our money, we would go to the fishermen. They'd put the fish in our boat. We'd carry them to Atlantic to Mr. Clayton Fulcher. And we'd stay down there, hang around the dock until they culled the fish, And all the scrap fish, that's what we got. We would take those back aboard the boat, come all the way back to Davis, to the oyster creeks, to Mr. Eddie Copeland, and sell them to him. And that's what money we got.
Oh, and what did he use the scrap fish for?
Well, he cooked them. They were a fish factory there at the oyster creeks at one time.
Oh, so it's mainly menhaden.
Well, it was everything then.
Oh.
It was small fish of all kinds that you couldn't sell on the market.
Right.
And there were a lot of menhaden in them, shad, but anything that you couldn't sell at that time.
And
you could sell it for scrap.
What was the gentleman's name?
Eddie Copeland. And later on, he sold it to Mr. Larry Morris. He ran it the latter years that it was.
It's at Davis.
Right, it's the wildlife ranching outfit.
Asking everybody if they want to. And Parker. Yeah, well, that's put forth in some books as facts, so I'm trying to find, basic location. Maybe we could get some archaeologists interested in looking around if we could find the approximate location. But anyway, well, that's very interesting. So you made your money off scrap fish. And my father told me one time that when he was long hauling, draw from the hat which run, which haul.
That's the way they did it.
Do you remember some of the names of the hauls?
Yeah. The inlet was the best haul there was. That was right across from sea level. The bay, Nelson Bay, was another haul. That's Nelson Bay, where you go out in the middle of the town. In the bay and sometimes according to where the wind was at, sometimes they'd bring them together on the sea level side, sometimes on the Stacy side. Then there were another haul was called Benny's Pound.
B-E-N-N-Y?
I-E, I think.
I-E.
P-O-U-N-D.
Benny's Pound.
That you launched, you pulled all the nets in there to the mouth of the oyster creeks. That's where they landed at there. Then over on the outer banks, there were a place across from Davis they called Southern Stakes.
Well, that's great. You remember any more? And listen, after we finish this,
not right off the top of my head now can I think of any more, but I'm sure there were. There were another one called Starnes Bay, and they landed in there on the sea level on the bay there on the off side of sea level. It's called Starnes Bay, and that's where they'd land at on the mouth of that creek.
Now, you as a transportation people, you had to know who was going where, didn't you? Or
they would draw the names at one of the stores there, most of the time in Stacy. Either Salter and Gaskell store or Lynn Gaskell had a store. Most of the time it was Salter and Gaskell's. That was Romaine Gaskell and Elmer Salter had a store there. I'd call it Salter and Gaskell. Or Gaskell's and Salters, I don't know which way that was. But,
and where was that located?
It was about middle of the community. It was right along the side of where Floyd Brown lives at now.
Okay.
It burned down years ago.
Mm-hmm. Was that near Foster's Creek?
Well, it was about halfway between Willis's Creek and Foster's Creek.
Okay. Okay.
And it was on the west side of the road.
On the west side. Okay.
There might be one or two more of the hall names. My cousin had done some research, and I've helped him in doing some of the research and naming creeks and places on the Outer Banks.
Was that Steve?
And no, it's well, I started out with Steve, but naming boats, all the boats and stuff that were in each community. Mm-hmm. And I think the last I talked to him, he'd give the information here to the museum.
That's probably.
But my cousin, he wanted to do it on his own, and I've been helping him.
Who's your cousin now?
Dolly Earl Foster.
Oh, sure.
He lives up in Virginia. And he was supposed to get all this going and give me a copy of all the. I've told him, but I've never got no copy yet. He's a little slow in his recording all this stuff.
Now, did he do a tape interview with you like we're doing today? Or?
No, we just sat down and put it on paper.
Okay. Well, now I'm sure we can get you a copy of this if you'd like.
Yeah, it'd be all right. Probably need a lot of editing, but.
Well, and did you ever go in the Core Banks Club? Did you ever go in there and see the?
I've probably been in there once or twice. We've never really invited guests in to the club. We had 2 blinds right out in front of the club. Me and my father and Mr. Elmer, and they were always feeding the ducks in their area, and they didn't like us
profiting off of that.
Profiting off of their expenditures. And we weren't in too good standing with the club back there then. They tried to buy our blinds several times, offered all kinds of money back there then. And I told my father, I said, as long as we live, don't never sell those blinds. And we still got them. My nephews maintain them now more than I do. I hardly ever go over there anymore, probably once a year. Mm-hmm. But we still got the 2 spots out in front of the club.
Did you ever put out any stake decoys, any of those silhouette decoys or anything, or did you just use the 3D?
Well, you couldn't use those on the offshore blinds, what we call the offshore blinds. And I don't recall us putting them along our shore blinds. Mm-hmm. We had some blinds on the shore too. Mm. That's where you could use those. But we always had enough decoys that really didn't need it.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about your beach blind. What was that like?
Well, we had several different kinds. Some of them we weren't up on the beach. We were just on the sound side of the shore. There were 2 that we dug holes in the ground and built a box and put in the ground where you could hardly see it from 100 yards looking in towards it.
So it was what size?
We usually made our blinds 4x5 for every 2 people. We never did like to hunt with more than 2 people in a blind. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous. We thought of shooting each other, the middleman, and we just built them 4x5. Then there were plenty of room for 2 people.
And how deep were they?
About 3 foot on the front and 4 on the back. Mm. We'd put the seat across the back, and we'd break some myrtle bushes and just stick them around the top of the blind to conceal yourself.
And when I pull the maps out, I mean, did you have special places you'd put those particular blinds?
Well, you'd want if you're on the shore, you'd want it on a point if you could get it, because that's where the ducks would fly more.
You could see more water.
You could see more water, like you say, and the ducks could see your decoys if you're out on a point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then what we call the stake blinds, the ones we had offshore, it really didn't make any difference. Then you just wanted a good place where there were grass and stuff that the duck would feed it.
Have you been to Clayton Fulcher's place over there? Do you know much about?
I never did go to that. It seemed one time I went to where Billy Smith had his camp down on the. I didn't go to hunting. I just went by it one time. I never did go to Clayton's.
It seems really big and fancy. I mean, I've never been in it either, but I was just wondering if you'd ever been inside of it.
Well, most of the camps weren't very fancy, I can tell you that. They were about as crude to just shelter is all it was. There were no luxury.
And that was a luxury just to have shelter over there.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Roy, I want to really thank you for your time today. And I think I could talk to you probably 2 or 3 days because you know so much. And maybe you'll allow us the luxury to come back and talk to us some more later. Would you mind doing that?
No.
Well, you certainly
I
have.
do most anything now anybody wants. Anybody asks me to do, that's what I do.
Well, just a final thought. Tell me what living on Core Sound has meant to you and the Banks, if you can.
Well, I think it's one of the better places that you could ever grow up and live. It's a way of life that it's for an individual. I mean, it's according to what you like. If you like to be in the city, or if you like to be in the country, I like to be in the country. I like to be able to do what I want to do, go where I want to. But all that is changing now. There are too many rules and regulations. And everybody thinks it's all for the best, but everything's getting worse and worse all the time. So it's just like fishing, hunting, or anything else. I still hunt. I do very little fishing anymore. I maintain the fishing license. When I first started, you didn't have to have any license. You could do anything you wanted, catch as many as you wanted to. They started license. That was the first thing. I kept them until they come out with you had to buy another license, $400 or $500 or something like that to sell what you caught. And I give my commercial license up, and I hardly do anything anymore. I've got a lifetime hunting license, and I can, if I want to go hook a line, and I can hook a line with that, and I can catch 100 clams, I think, or a bushel of oysters, or half a bushel, whichever that is, and that's all I do anymore.
Right.
But I've enjoyed my life. Never had a whole lot of fancy things, but I've been comfortable.
Well, Roy, thank you. I think you're a blessed man, and I appreciate you coming by and talking with us today. And I'll talk to you later.
All right. And I reckon my wife has too.
Miss Ina.
Yeah, I guess she's put up with a lot.
What most wives do. I don't think she's any different from any other wife or any other husband.
We've enjoyed it. We've had a small house we live in. It's big enough for two of us. And those people now, they got to have a 14-room house for two people. We've got a 4-room and a bath. It's plenty big for us.